My name is Sterling Elliott, and I absolutely love this cello.
Sterling.
Hey.
Here we are in beautiful Manchester, Vermont.
Oh yeah.
Playing some chamber music together.
We are.
Sook Piano Quartet. Didn't know it existed.
Nope.
Mendelssohn's first piano quartet.
Of 3. Didn't know they existed.
Of 3, yeah. I mean, that's kind of incredible. He was 13, I think, when he wrote this. But we've been having a great time here. Mm-hmm. And you are also holding a really special instrument. And I was kind of shocked when you went to kind of like, you moved across the room, and I noticed that the back of your scroll is completely hollowed out.
Yeah, it is. It has a really unique open back scroll that it's the only one that I've ever seen in person. The only other cello that I know of that has it is the Greenhouse Stradivarius. You can see pictures of it online.
Bernard Greenhouse,
yes,
yeah. And so you've seen pictures of that. Have you compared like the kind of openings? Like, is it done in the same way? Was this done after, in the style of Stradivarius?
I can only imagine. Yeah. When it comes to the specific backgrounds of the scroll, I really have no idea, and people ask me so much. I wish I knew more. The only sort of speculation that I can say is that probably just for ease of stringing the cello in the time of gut strings and excess string length.
But let's be honest, you did it yourself, right? No, so what kind of cello is this? Like, what are we looking at? What are you playing?
Sure, so this is a Gagliano cello, a Gennaro Gagliano cello.
Gennaro, all right.
Gennaro, one of the 2 big sons of Alexander Gagliano. And it's from 1741. Been playing it for about a whole year now.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me about how you kind of came to know this instrument. Like, how did you find it? Like, what's the background with it?
Sure. Yeah, I was searching for instruments in the year of 2021.
2021, like in the height of the pandemic.
Yeah.
Or like in the middle, well, good solid,
I was approaching my end of time at Juilliard as an undergraduate, and so I had been borrowing their instruments for quite
some
quite a
really
number of
nice
years.
instruments.
Yeah,
which one were you borrowing?
At the time I was using the Tononi cello, which was just an absolute Ferrari of a cello. And so I was just approaching, my deadline of having to give a cello back, and I was really hoping to have an instrument that I could use for long-term use outside of Juilliard. And I started searching around all the shops, asking people, searching around shops outside of state, and just seeing if there's anything out there that I enjoyed, that I really loved.
Yeah.
And when I was at Tarisio, not actually looking for instruments, I was recording and working on their auction instruments to get them prepared.
Tarisio, the online auction house.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes, I was there helping them get their auction instruments ready for sale, and just recording a little excerpt on them. And
on the instruments?
On the instruments.
Oh, okay,
yes.
That's nice.
I've been doing that sort of frequently. And while I was at Tarisio, Carlos Tomé came up, and he knew I was searching for...
one of the great sales people there.
Oh, yes, yeah.
And really
and great human beings, especially. He came up to me while I was...
And a violist.
I didn't know he was a violist.
Yeah, he plays viola.
I thought he was a violinist.
No. Maybe he plays violin, but come on. Let's
Yeah, he came up to me, and he was like, I hear you're looking for cellos, and I told him that the auction instruments I was playing on were great, but they weren't something I was ready to fall in love with. And he said, I have some instruments in the back I could maybe show you. And he brought out
out of the vault.
Yeah, out of the vault. He brought out 2 instruments, and this was one of them. And I specifically with this instrument, with both of them, but specifically with this one, when I played just a single note, a few notes, I immediately told Carlos, I can tell this is really expensive.
Yeah.
I think this is outside of my budget, far outside of my budget. And he said, just play on it. Do you like it?
Yeah.
And I had no interest in wasting anyone's time, so I was just genuinely trying to figure out if I loved it or not. And I was really loving what I was hearing.
Yeah.
He told me to take it home and try it. It was a few days before I was...
That's dangerous.
It was dangerous, especially because it was a few days before I was leaving for music at Menlo Festival in Menlo Park.
And in 2020, won. Did they have a real festival, like in person?
They did.
Okay.
They did.
Great.
And of course, it was my first time there. You can only go once. And it was probably 2 or 3 days before I was leaving for there. And I had decided after having the cello for 2 days that I loved it enough that I was going to take it to Menlo to really give it a full test drive, a full-on test drive. I mean, music at Menlo is definitely the kind of place where you'll see if the cello has the chops to get the job done.
Because you're in a variety of venues.
Different
musicians.
Amazing different musicians.
And discerning audience.
Yeah. And so, yeah. And on top of that sort of test drive, immediately after Menlo, I had a huge debut at Hollywood Bowl playing Rococo Variations. And so in the 2 days I had the cello
Was that with LA?
With LA Phil.
Okay.
And so the 2 days that I had this cello before I left, I knew if I took it, it'd be a massive risk. And so it wasn't something that I was deciding, sort of on a whim, but I really so truly believed in this cello's potential.
Yeah.
That I knew that it was a leap of faith that would be worth it. Incredible. And I returned from Menlo, California, back to New York for 2 days before going back to LA for the performance. And in that time, we changed a little bit of the setup. We changed some of the tailpiece, the bridge from French to Belgian bridge.
Yeah.
New strings and new different sound post adjustment, and got it just sounding like a rock star. And it's been the same setup ever since.
So what's the difference between a Belgian and a French bridge?
So in my experience, when I first acquired the cello and it had a French bridge as well as a rosewood tailpiece, it was such a warm sound that sort of didn't have any cutting force. And so penetration and projection weren't really in the cards, but there was an incredible amount of resonance. It just wasn't really focused.
Right.
And so in my experience, Belgian bridges, and it's what most soloists use, and so I really think it immediately converts a lot of the sound into a more direct path.
Right, and this is like when you're getting up in front of an orchestra and you need a little bit more clarity, a little bit more projection across the stage, right? That's great. So how did this relationship begin? Like, so you fell in love with the instrument?
Yes.
And then...
So Carlos had told me that there was a potential sponsor, one that I personally knew, and he personally knew me, but at the time he was remaining anonymous. Before the deal was being confirmed.
And so this is somebody who knows you as a person, as a musician, and kind of cares about your development.
But I had no idea who this person was at the time. So for the few months I was trying out the cello, and we were seeing if ends would meet on both ends of whether I really loved it enough to want it after having it for a few months, and seeing if the patron was wanting to go for it with the deal. I had no clue who was this magic friend, I guess, of mine who was so caring to support me in my endeavors. Yeah. And so once everything was finalized, once Carlos was able to tell me who this person was, it ended up being a good friend, mentor of mine. His name is Robert Frederick Smith. He's been a long-time supporter of the Sphinx organization. In fact, I first played at his house in Denver, Colorado when I was 14 years old. Oh. And it was his first time being introduced to the Sphinx organization. We had myself and a few other Sphinx artists there to introduce him to the organization. He later became a huge patron of the organization with a large donation, and he's also the board chairman of Carnegie Hall. So he's very well.
Cares a lot about music and musicians.
He's a huge patron of the arts and the entire scene.
That's wonderful.
And I've had a personal relationship with him for about 10 years, and so I was so happy to hear that he was the one who would be supporting me.
That's right, because you go back. I mean, you have some history. And And he's also watched you develop from a 14-year-old, you said?
Yes.
And through now.
Yeah, he's really seen my career grow. He's really quite literally been there every step of the way, continually bringing me out to different performance opportunities. Even he brought me to Europe for the first time in Switzerland to perform at the World Economic Forum. And so he's really been extremely helpful.
And it's really fascinating because a lot of situations where, you know, if you're borrowing an instrument or an instrument is loaned to you, you don't get to actually choose the instrument particularly. And in this case, you fell in love with the instrument.
Yes.
And then it turns out that you had this wonderful kind of human connection.
Yeah.
So that's really special. So.
Yeah, it's really special. It's really rare from all the instruments that I've tried and continue to try just for fun to see what else is out there in terms of trying friends' instruments. Falling in love at first sight with an instrument sort of sounds like something that just doesn't realistically happen.
Yeah.
And so for that to actually happen with this instrument and for it to have a happy ending is such a rare. I feel so incredibly lucky to have this success story.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
How would you describe this instrument?
So I think one of the biggest characteristics of the instrument to me is its resonance. Again, before I had the setup adjusted, I felt like it had unlimited resonance with, but again, without a focal point. And so now that it has sort of a more tamed, concentrated sound, it still has just massive resonance with overtones, and I find that it just ends up having a massive sound, I guess, at that point. It's also a relatively bright instrument, bright timbre, so it's not an extremely moody, dark, broody sort of timbre, but it's wonderful for all. It seems to have no cons.
That's wonderful. And I've also been kind of noticing, just looking at the instrument up close, the Gagliano family were incredible makers. But sometimes the people who commissioned them wanted a deal, and so they would use, like, you know, lower grade wood, or they would paint the purfling on. In this case, it's beautiful wood. It's great purfling. It's, you know, it's a really, like, you know, top quality instrument. You know, and that's from really fantastic makers. So it's a real pleasure to see.
Yeah, and I got extremely lucky as well with the instrument because it was kept in really well. It was kept in really good condition, I guess, over the years. It was kept in seemingly one family for quite a number of years, and so that helped to just preserve the condition. So,
wonderful.
Yeah.
Do you mind playing a few notes?
I don't mind at all. Sure.
All right.